I never thought I'd be the kind of man who'd lose everything at 62. But there I was, standing in my own kitchen on a Tuesday morning in February, watching my wife of 38 years pack her Louis Vuitton suitcase like she was heading to some luxury resort instead of walking out on our marriage. "Thomas, I need you to sign these," Margaret said, sliding a manila envelope across the granite countertop we'd picked out together when we renovated 5 years ago. Her voice was steady, practiced, like she'd rehearsed this moment. I opened the envelope. Divorce papers. The words blurred together, but I caught the important parts. Irreconcilable differences. Division of assets. Spousal support. What's this? My hands were shaking. I'd survived 2 heart attacks. Built 3 successful hardware stores across Ontario. Raised 2 sons. But nothing prepared me for this. "I think it's pretty clear," she said, not even looking at me. She was folding cashmere sweaters, the ones I'd bought her for Christmas. "I'm done, Thomas. I've been done for a while." Done. 38 years summed up in one word. "Is there someone else?" I asked, though part of me already knew. She paused, just for a second. That told me everything. "His name is Richard Bowmont. He's the president of the golf club. We've been seeing each other for 18 months. 18 months? A year and a half. While I was working 70-hour weeks to keep our stores afloat during the pandemic, while I was visiting my mother in the nursing home every Sunday, while I was planning our 40th anniversary trip to Scotland, she was with him. Richard's different from you, Thomas. He's refined, cultured. He actually enjoys the theater and fine dining. He doesn't spend every weekend covered in sawdust, talking about lumber prices." The contempt in her voice cut deeper than any saw blade ever had. "Margaret, we built this life together. The house, the business, everything. Our sons. Our sons are grown men with their own families. They don't need us anymore. And honestly," she zipped her suitcase, "I don't need you anymore either. Richard's taking me to his villa in Provence next month. When was the last time you took me anywhere besides Home Depot?" I wanted to argue. To remind her of the mortgage I'd paid, the university tuitions, the medical bills, when she had breast cancer 10 years ago, and I never left her side. But she was already halfway to the door. "My lawyer will be in touch. I suggest you get one too. A good one. Because I'm entitled to half of everything we've built, including the stores." Then she was gone. Just like that. 38 years reduced to the sound of her Mercedes pulling out of our driveway. I sat at that kitchen counter for 3 hours, staring at those papers. The house felt massive and empty. Every corner held a memory, and every memory now felt like a lie. Had she ever really loved me? Or had I just been convenient? The hardware store owner with steady income and good insurance? My phone buzzed. A text from our eldest son, Robert. "Dad," Mom told me. "I'm so sorry. Call me when you're ready." So the boys already knew. Of course they did. She'd probably told them weeks ago. Got them prepared. I was the last to know about the demolition of my own life. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers and accountants, and sleepless nights. My attorney, Donald Chen, was a sharp guy in his 40s who'd handled several high-profile divorces in Toronto. "Thomas, I'll be straight with you," he said during our second meeting. "Ontario is a 50-50 province. Unless we can prove fault or hidden assets, she's entitled to half of the marital property. That includes your share of the hardware stores." "The stores are my life, Donald. My father started the first one in 1978. I've been working there since I was 16. I understand. But legally, any appreciation in value during the marriage is marital property. I'd built those stores from 1 location in Mississauga to 3 across the Greater Toronto Area. Current valuation, $12 million. Margaret wanted $6 million, plus the house, plus ongoing spousal support. She never worked a day in those stores," I said, trying to keep my voice level. She was busy with her charity galas and book clubs, while I was unclogging toilets and dealing with suppliers. "Doesn't matter. She contributed to the household, raised your children. That counts." It felt like being robbed in slow motion by the legal system. Then things got worse. Word of the divorce spread through our social circle like wildfire. Suddenly, I was the pariah. The Tuesday morning golf group I'd been part of for 20 years, they didn't return my calls. The couples we'd had dinner with for decades, radio silence. Turns out, Richard Bowmont wasn't just any club president. He was old money, connected, influential. And Margaret had been very strategic in her storytelling, painting me as the neglectful husband, the workaholic who ignored her needs, the dinosaur who couldn't appreciate the finer things. Even some of my business associates started distancing themselves. In a small community like ours, perception was everything, and the perception was that I'd somehow failed as a husband. My assistant manager, Kevin, came into my office one afternoon in March. He was 35, ambitious, someone I'd mentored for 8 years. "Thomas, I need to talk to you about something." I looked up from the quarterly reports I'd been reviewing, numbers that used to make sense but now just looked like abstract chaos. "What's up, Kevin?" "I've been offered a position at Lowe's, regional manager for their Ontario operations. It's a significant step up. I should have seen it coming. The rats fleeing the sinking ship. When do you start?" 2 weeks. "I'm sorry, Thomas, but with everything going on, with the divorce and the uncertainty about the business, I have a family to think about." I nodded. Couldn't even be angry. He was right to jump ship. Who knew what would happen to my stores once Margaret's lawyers got their hands on them? After Kevin left, I sat in that office until midnight. The same office where I'd signed my first major supplier contract, where I'd planned expansion strategies, where I'd felt like I was building something that mattered. Now it all felt pointless. My phone rang. "Robert." "Dad, are you still at the store?" "It's almost 1 a.m. Lost track of time," I said. "Dad, have you eaten today?" Had I? I couldn't remember. "Why don't you come stay with us for a while? Laura's worried about you. The kids miss their grandpa." "I'm fine, son." "You're not fine. Mom's telling everyone you were emotionally abusive. She's got half of Oakville thinking you're some kind of monster. And you're not defending yourself." "What's the point?" I said. "People believe what they want to believe." After we hung up, I drove home to that big, empty house. Margaret had taken most of the furniture she wanted. The place looked like a museum of a life that no longer existed. I poured myself a whiskey, something I rarely did, and sat in the den. On the mantel was a photo from our 25th anniversary. We were in Niagara-on-the-Lake, at some fancy restaurant Margaret had insisted on. She was smiling at the camera. I was smiling at her. I picked up the photo and looked at it closely. Really looked at it. And I realized something. In that picture, she wasn't looking at me with love. She was looking at me the way someone looks at a reliable appliance. Useful, functional, nothing more. Maybe I'd been blind for years. Maybe the signs were always there and I'd ignored them because I was too busy building, working, providing. Or maybe, just maybe, I'd mistaken comfort for happiness and obligation for love. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, letting the divorce drain me emotionally and financially. I needed something to change. A fresh start, even if I didn't know what that looked like yet. The next morning, I called my youngest son, Michael. He lived in Vancouver, worked in tech, had always been the more adventurous one. "Michael, how hard would it be to relocate to BC?" There was a pause. "Dad, are you serious? What about the stores?" "I'm thinking of selling them, taking my half, whatever that ends up being, and starting over somewhere your mother's poison hasn't spread." "Dad, you love those stores." "I loved a lot of things, son. Turns out I was wrong about most of them." 3 weeks later, I was on a plane to Vancouver. I'd left Donald to handle the negotiations with Margaret's lawyer. I'd left Kevin's replacement to manage the day-to-day operations. I just needed to breathe air that didn't remind me of failure. Michael picked me up at the airport. He was 34, lean, had his mother's eyes, but thankfully not her temperament. "You look terrible, Dad. Thanks for the warm welcome. I'm serious. When's the last time you slept? When's the last time you did anything besides work and worry? What else is there?" He drove me to his apartment in Yaletown, a sleek, modern building that felt nothing like the traditional homes of Ontario. Everything was glass and steel and possibility. "Dad, I want you to meet someone, a friend of mine who might be able to help." The next day, Michael introduced me to Harrison Wolfe. Harrison was 73, a retired real estate developer who'd made his fortune building commercial properties across Western Canada. He'd been widowed for 5 years, and spent most of his time now mentoring younger entrepreneurs and managing his investment portfolio. We met at a coffee shop near English Bay. Harrison was tall, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who assessed you in the first 30 seconds and decided if you were worth his time. "Michael tells me you're going through a rough patch." Harrison said, stirring his Americano. That's putting it mildly. Divorce? 38 years. She left me for someone at the golf club. Harrison nodded. Didn't offer empty sympathy. I appreciated that. What are you going to do? Honestly, I have no idea. I'm 62, Harrison. Starting over at 62 feels like a joke. You know what's a joke? Harrison leaned back. Giving up. I started my most successful venture at 68. After my wife died, everyone expected me to just fade away. Play golf, take cruises, wait to die. Instead, I identified a gap in the Vancouver warehouse market and built a portfolio that's now worth $40 million. $40 million. At 68, I'm not sure I have that kind of fight left in me. Bullshit. You built 3 hardware stores from scratch. You survived the 2008 financial crisis, the pandemic, and 38 years with a woman who clearly didn't appreciate you. You've got more fight in you than most 30-year-olds I meet. Something in his words sparked something in me I thought had died. What would you do if you were me? Harrison smiled. First, I'd stop thinking like a victim. Second, I'd start thinking like an investor. You're about to have a significant amount of capital from the sale of your business, correct? If Margaret doesn't bleed me dry in the settlement. Yes. Good. Here's what you need to understand, Thomas. Revenge isn't about being petty. It's about becoming so successful that the person who dismissed you realizes they made the biggest mistake of their life. And the best part? By the time they realize it, you won't even care anymore because you've built something better. Over the next 3 months, Harrison became my mentor, my therapist, and my friend. He introduced me to his network, taught me about real estate investment, showed me opportunities I'd never considered. Meanwhile, back in Ontario, the divorce proceedings dragged on. Margaret's lawyer was aggressive, demanding not just half the business value, but also claiming I'd hidden assets. It was absurd and insulting, but Donald handled it. Thomas, I have news. Donald called me one afternoon in June. Margaret's team is willing to settle. You keep 2 of the 3 stores. She takes the house and $4 million in cash. No ongoing spousal support. What's the catch? No catch. I think her lawyer realized she'd overplayed her hand. The judge wasn't sympathetic to her claims of your emotional abuse, especially after your sons testified on your behalf. And apparently, her relationship with Bowmont is having some issues. His ex-wife has been making things difficult. Karma's a funny thing. I accepted the settlement, kept the Mississauga and Brampton locations, sold the Toronto store for $8 million, gave Margaret her $4 million, and the house I no longer wanted anyway. After lawyers' fees and taxes, I was left with approximately $6.5 million. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Harrison had been working on something in the background, and in August, he brought me to a property in Surrey, just outside Vancouver. It's a 30,000 square foot warehouse with adjacent land for expansion, he explained. Currently owned by a family trust that's liquidating. Market value is probably $3 million, but they need to sell quickly. I can get it for 2 to 2. Harrison, I don't know anything about warehouses. No, but you know retail. You understand inventory management, logistics, supplier relationships. This property is zoned for light industrial and commercial. The Surrey market is booming. Amazon, Walmart, every major retailer is expanding here. They need warehouse space. We lease it to them. I looked at the property. It was rough, needed work, but I could see the potential. We? I asked. I'll come in as a partner, 30%. You put up the capital, I provide the expertise and connections. We fix this place up, sign anchor tenants, then leverage it to acquire more properties. In 5 years, we could have a portfolio worth 30, 40 million. Standing there in that empty warehouse, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Excitement, purpose. Let's do it. We closed on the property in September. Spent the next 4 months renovating, installing new electrical systems, bringing the building up to code. I worked alongside the contractors, did what I'd always done best, figure out solutions, manage people, get things done. By January, we had our first tenant, a mid-sized logistics company on a 5-year lease at $45,000 per month. By March, the second unit was leased to an e-commerce fulfillment center. By June, the entire building was at capacity. Harrison was right. The income was substantial, and more importantly, the property value had appreciated significantly. Thomas, "I've got another opportunity," Harrison said one morning over breakfast. "An industrial complex in Richmond. 6 buildings, total square footage of 80,000. The owner is retiring, wants to liquidate. Price is $8 million. Harrison, that's more capital than I have. That's where financing comes in. We put down 20%, get a commercial mortgage for the rest. The rental income covers the mortgage and gives us positive cash flow. It's how wealth is built. I'd spent my entire career avoiding debt, paying cash for everything. This was different territory. But I trusted Harrison. More importantly, I trusted myself again. We bought the Richmond complex, then another property in Burnaby, then a small warehouse park in Coquitlam. By the time I turned 64, our portfolio was worth $38 million. My personal net worth had grown from $6.5 million to nearly $18 million. I'd also lost 40 pounds, started running, and was dating a woman named Catherine Park, a 59-year-old architect I'd met through Harrison's circle. She was intelligent, independent, had her own successful practice, and laughed at my jokes. She also had no interest in my money, because she had her own. Life was good. Better than good. Then, on a crisp October morning, my phone rang. "Robert, Dad, you're not going to believe this. Mom called me yesterday. She and Richard broke up. Apparently, he's been having financial problems, and his ex-wife sued him for back alimony. Mom's been helping him with money, but it's been draining her settlement. She asked if you'd consider reconciling." I was silent for a moment. "Dad? You there?" "Yeah. I'm here. Just processing. You're not seriously considering it, are you?" "Not for a second. I just think it's interesting. The timing." "She also asked about your business. Said she heard through someone that you're doing well out in BC. Of course she had. Small world, the social circles of wealthy Ontarians. Someone must have mentioned my name, my success. And suddenly, good old reliable Thomas didn't look so pathetic anymore. 2 weeks later, I flew back to Toronto for Robert's daughter's birthday party. I'd bought Emma a beautiful bicycle and couldn't wait to see her face. I was staying at a hotel, had no desire to revisit any of my old haunts. But Catherine convinced me to at least drive past the old house, see how I felt. So there I was, pulling my rented Tesla down the familiar tree-lined streets of Oakville, when I saw her. Margaret was standing in the driveway of what used to be our home. She looked older, tired. The house was for sale, a large sign on the lawn. I pulled over. Something compelled me to talk to her one last time. "Thomas?" She looked genuinely surprised. "I heard you were in town. Emma's birthday." "Of course. You always remembered the grandkids' birthdays." There was something wistful in her voice. "House didn't work out?" I nodded at the for sale sign. "It's too big for just me. And the maintenance. It's expensive." "I imagine it is." There was an awkward silence. "Thomas, I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually." "You don't owe me anything, Margaret." "I do. I was cruel. I was selfish. I threw away something good because I thought I deserved something better. Turns out, what I thought was better was just shinier, not more valuable." I looked at this woman I'd spent 38 years with. I waited to feel anger, satisfaction, vindication. Instead, I just felt neutral, like I was looking at a stranger who happened to know some of my stories. "I heard you're doing well," she continued. "Real estate in Vancouver. That you've built something impressive." "I'm happy, Margaret. That's what I've built. Happiness." "With someone else?" "Yes." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "I'm glad. You deserve that. I just wish." "Wish what?" "That I'd appreciated what I had when I had it." I took a deep breath. This was the moment I'd imagined 1,000 times over the past 3 years. The moment where she'd realize her mistake, where I'd have the power, where I could choose to be gracious or vindictive. "Margaret, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it. When you left, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. But you know what I actually lost? I lost the illusion that I needed to shrink myself to keep someone happy. I lost the belief that my worth was tied to being useful to people who didn't value me. What I gained was so much more valuable." "Thomas, I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm saying it because it's true. You didn't destroy me. You freed me. So thank you. Genuinely, thank you." I got back in the Tesla. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. Margaret was still standing there, watching me leave. This time, she was the one being left behind. At Emma's party that evening, surrounded by my sons, their wives, my grandchildren, I felt complete. Catherine had flown in to join me, and watching her interact so naturally with my family, I realized something profound. Some people spend their whole lives searching for their worth in others' opinions. I'd done that for decades. But true worth isn't given by others. It's not found in being needed or being useful or being the reliable one who never complains. True worth is intrinsic. It's about knowing you can survive the worst, rebuild from nothing, and create something meaningful even when everyone counts you out. I'm 65 now. Harrison and I just acquired our 15th property, and we're expanding into commercial office space. Catherine and I got married last spring in a small ceremony at Lighthouse Park, with just our families and Harrison as my best man. I still miss parts of my old life sometimes. The familiarity of those Ontario seasons, the stores I built with my own hands, even some of the easier moments with Margaret before everything fell apart. But I don't miss who I was. That Thomas was a good man, but he was also a man who'd forgotten how to live for himself, who'd mistaken sacrifice for love and duty for purpose. The man I am now knows better. Here's what I learned, and I share this with anyone going through something similar. First, betrayal will hollow you out. It will make you question everything you thought you knew about yourself and others. Let it. That hollow space is where new growth begins. Second, revenge isn't about making someone suffer. It's about reclaiming your power and building a life so fulfilling that the person who dismissed you becomes irrelevant. Third, it's never too late. At 62, I thought my best years were behind me. I was wrong. My best years started the day I decided to stop mourning what I lost and start building what I wanted. Fourth, surround yourself with people who see your potential, not your wounds. Harrison saw something in me I couldn't see in myself. Catherine loved the man I was becoming, not the man I used to be. And finally, the sweetest victory isn't when your ex realizes they made a mistake. It's when you realize you've stopped caring, whether they do or not. That's freedom. That's success. That's winning. I never thanked Margaret for handing me those divorce papers, but maybe I should have. Because the day she decided to destroy me was the day I finally started building the life I was actually meant to live. And that life, I've discovered, is absolutely worth living.